What's up? What's up? Remember me? I'm Cody. I was here before you went on that incredible journey through the land of advertisements. We're all a little older now, a little wiser. Before the break, we more or less described how airlines are festering heaps of gorilla waste. But it's now time to talk about why. Why are airlines festering heaps of gorilla waste? I'm talking ape shit and piss, my friends. And that means it's time for our favorite ongoing game that we didn't have to make a graphic for just for this video. How did deregulation screw us? Oh yeah, baby, sock it to me! Get your home copies out and gather the awful little kids because we have a history lesson for you. While the first passenger airline service was in 1914, stuff didn't get real until a few decades later. In 1938, Congress created the Civil Aeronautics Administration, or CA, as the first regulatory agency for airlines. A few years later, FDR would split CA into two distinct agencies, one designed to regulate air traffic control and flight safety measures, and the other for accident investigations and economic regulation of commercial airlines. That latter group would be the Civil Aeronautics Board, or CAB. CAB did things like regulate air routes and flight frequency, anything designed to oversee the interaction between the public and the airlines. Predictably, the CAB ultimately did not have the resources to keep up with the ever-growing market of air travel. But we'll get to that in a moment, because right now, and by right now I mean from the 1950s to the 1970s, we were in the golden age of air travel. You've seen the pictures. Heck, maybe you were even alive and Don drapering around to visit your many families. Here's a taste.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We are now at cruising altitude, 35,000 feet. Our flying speed is 575 miles per hour. In addition, we're benefiting from a substantial tailwind by courtesy of the jet stream. Hence, our ground speed is now approximately 658 miles per hour. Indications are that our arrival at London Airport may be ahead of schedule.
Hot damn! Except for all the racism and misogyny and probably a lot of other terrible things, that looks great. Cocktail lounges, 5-course meals, fucking ice sculptures and junk, everyone all dressed up like it's a fancy sky funeral. Why isn't it like that today? The easy answer is that airlines back then were regulated under the CAB, except that's not actually the easy answer. The actual answer to why airlines looked so fucking fabulous during this time was because they were extremely expensive to use. For example, in 1974, the minimum price for a ticket from New York City to LA, adjusted for inflation, was $1,442 minimum. That's probably why, in the 1960s, only about 20% of Americans had ever flown at all. It was a luxury item, which of course meant that it was mostly for white people. So when you see pictures of scantily clad stewardesses grinding their teeth through hours of sexual harassment to bring some bright-eyed child a tray of gelatin pork bananas or whatever, and you think, wow, that could have been me, I'm here to tell you that statistically, it couldn't have been you. Also, there were just so many skyjackings during that time because we hadn't thought to do any security, I guess. It was not actually a good time to fly, is my point. So, cut to the late 1970s, and a congressional investigation would look into why commercial airlines were so gosh darn expensive. The answer they came up with, which was absolutely true, was that deregulation would increase competition and drive down ticket prices. You see, when I said that plane tickets had a minimum price, that's because the government mandated that price, because that ensured that both the airlines got paid and the customer was treated well. By taking the government out of it, airlines could bring down their prices to better compete with each other. And so in 1978, the Airline Deregulation Act was passed with bipartisan support and signed into law by... Oh, wow. I automatically expected to see Reagan there, since we're talking about deregulation that would ultimately degrade an American service. But I really can't stress that at the time, this was bipartisan. Also, it worked, and ticket prices almost immediately plummeted after this. However, along with deregulating the airlines, this law completely dissolved the CAB as well. And perhaps that was going a little bit too far, as evidenced by the pit of hell that currently surrounds the airline industry. Because along with giving them the ability to compete, deregulating the airlines also allowed them to start thinking about ways to make even more money than before. It also made them more susceptible to a recession, and in the early 80s, both of these problems perfectly came together like the devil's Reese's cup.
The union representing those who man America's air traffic control facilities called a strike. This was the culmination of 7 months of negotiations between the Federal Aviation Administration and the union. They are in violation of the law, and if they do not report for work within 48 hours, they have forfeited their jobs and will be terminated.
There he is! I was getting a little worried there for a moment. Along with affecting the airlines, Reagan's mass firing of over 11,000 striking air traffic controllers marked a very important moment for labor in this country. To quote former Federal Reserve Chair Alan Greenspan, speaking directly about this event, his action gave weight to the legal right of private employers, previously not fully exercised, to use their own discretion to both hire and discharge workers. But more pressing to the moment, firing that many air traffic controllers really does a number on the then inflated airline industry, especially during a recession. And so company after company began to tank. Many airlines cut benefits and wages and forced more strikes that led to less business, and so on and so forth. Layoffs and mergers became the new hotness, and ultimately we lost countless brands such as Pan Am, Laker Airways, Braniff, Eastern Airlines, and of course, Trump Shuttle. In fairness, that last airline was never financially profitable on account of it being run by a bad businessman, but the rest of those companies could have survived. By the 90s, airlines had suffered huge losses, and so only the biggest airlines had any chance of making it. Some companies used this to their advantage. For example, American Airlines brought down their prices in key areas in order to drive smaller competitors out of business. They would then raise their prices back up once those companies called it quits. Clinton's DOJ actually sued the company for their predatory pricing in the late 90s and lost to the airlines due to a lack of proof. In other words, we were now balls deep in deregulation's effects. The government seemed unable to stop airlines from pushing each other around. And yet we needed airlines to survive. People need to fly places. That created a situation where we couldn't regulate the airlines, but also had to bail them out so they still existed. See, that DOJ American Airlines case really sums it up. The case was ended in April of 2001, and for whatever strange reason, airline stock began to tank not long after that in late September of 2001. Not sure what's happening there. Probably has something to do with the movie Hardball coming out, and so airlines began to need bailouts from our government, and we just gave them the money despite constantly having these legal issues with them. And after a long war in the mid-2000s, presumably about the movie Hardball, people were pretty goddamn tired of the same old government hogwash. They were ready for things to, I don't know, a word for stuff not being the thing that they currently are. Who could help us during this time?
I'm Barack Obama.
Why, hello! Yes, we were saved! Change! Hope! Etc. We did it! Let's celebrate! Let's all fuck each other to celebrate! Wait. Oh, wow. Okay, so apparently it was not the movie Hardball that led to the Iraq War, but an attack on the World Trade Center? But more importantly to this video, President Barack Obama did not, it seems, help the situation with the airlines. In fact, despite speaking out against mergers, the Obama administration oversaw 3 major airline mergers, resulting in just 4 fucking companies having control over 80% of the market. This includes a merger between American Airlines and US Airways, something his DOJ originally fought against right up until it did not. The reason for this reversal sure appears to be a very comfy relationship between airline lobbyists and Democrats, specifically at the Justice Department and within the White House at the time. I don't know if you've noticed this yet, but it appears that fucking over American consumers in exchange for bloated monopolies is a very bipartisan tradition in this country. And so with absolutely no one to help us with this ever-expanding problem, the situation just got worse and worse. A ridiculously consolidated market enabled a handful of super big companies to conspire together and maximize their profits while diminishing customer experience. This is the reason a single absolutely hellbound consultant consultant created a brand new system of baggage fees that did not exist before the late 2000s, or why American Airlines and JetBlue were able to form an unofficial alliance in order to limit competition in the Northeast and keep their prices up. In other words, everything we originally wanted deregulation to achieve is no longer happening, because airlines have no reason to be competitive anymore. You can say some of it was out of their control because of economic turmoil and hardball, but the result is the same, and they're perfectly happy just the way they are. Because everything the country has done for decades has encouraged this behavior. Remember when I said Clinton's DOJ sued an airline for predatory pricing and lost because of lack of proof? Well, that's because in 1993, the Supreme Court case, Brook Group v. Brown and Williamson Tobacco Corp., made it way harder for the government to prove predatory pricing. For that, and a bunch of other Supreme Court decisions, it's nearly impossible for regulators to go after baggage fees or airlines pushing out competition or conspiring together. And the airlines know this, which is why we're now seeing them unbundle most of their fares. No longer are they worried about making us pay more for extra legroom, overhead bin space, extra bags, rebooking, and just about everything that used to come with a standard ticket price. Because who's going to stop them? You? You're so drunk you can barely sit there. And as long as they all coordinate, they can gouge us any way they see fit. Of course, there was a brief window where it seemed like this model would no longer work. And that, of course, brings us to the era of the World Wide Web, cyberspace, the great digital frontier. Bleeps and bloops. And then the free porn shows up on the computer box.
Change your search without using the back button. Another way Expedia makes it easy to find the trip you're looking for.
Expedia.com.
Change your search without hitting the back button, you say? It really is the future. So a quick bit about how airline pricing works today. In short, it's a basket of horny snakes. Horny, kinky snakes who want to human beings. Another way to describe it is as an algorithm, because that's what it actually is. And all that algorithm does is look at the current market and determine the highest possible fare that can be charged, specifically the basic economy fare. But that isn't actually going to be what you ultimately pay, because thanks to websites like Expedia and Travelocity and Kayak and Plane Sluts, the name of the game is getting your airline on the top page of search results for affordable ticket prices. In a functioning world, that makes sense. That would just mean that airlines would have to compete in order to bring down their prices. But that's not what they're actually doing. Enter drip pricing. Drip pricing is the practice where during the process of buying something, the price of the item slowly goes up due to various fees and add-ons that are often mandatory for that thing. In other words, an airline can say that a ticket is only $200, get to the top of those search engines, and then expand that price as you journey through their hellish checkout. Most airlines known for lower costs are actually making most of their revenue through those extra fees. Half of Frontier Airlines' revenue, for example, came from fees instead of ticket sales. And if you've flown recently, you obviously know this. You click on one price, and then that price starts going up the more, big quotes, extra services you select. This is why the process of buying a ticket is designed to be complicated, and why prices and fees often fluctuate depending on the time and destination. For example, airline seats are one of the only products that get more valuable the closer they are to expiring. That's because they use a yield management system to control pricing, which is basically the act of changing pricing based on the behavior of a consumer. If someone really needs a ticket at the last minute, they will pay more for it. That's why most flights will have between 10 and 20 different prices depending on when you try to purchase your seats. To sum it up, the entire process is purposefully confusing and deceptive. The end goal being the airlines getting more money from you than if they made the process straightforward, honest, and or helpful. And in fact, according to one Harvard study, customers who choose the lower presenting price options very often end up paying way more than other expensive seeming options, thanks to this drip pricing technique. And while prices have absolutely reduced since the 1970s, it's worth pointing out that those calculations are likely based on starting prices listed by airlines and not the final prices after all the fees. And if you were to actually compare what you were getting in the 70s versus what you get now, you come to realize that prices haven't actually lowered that much. Hey, why do I feel so mad right now? Oh, right, it's because of all the things I just said. Grrr, I go. So that's everything up until the 2010s, a harrowing tale of deregulation and lobbying, all compounding in order to make airlines the worst fucking companies imaginable. And yet it still feels like we don't have a solution here. Surely there's something. What would Reagan do, you know? Oh, right. So I guess let us think on this whilst cutting to some ads. Maybe it'll be an Expedia ad this time, so as to continue the irony and by extension, situational humor. BRB.
Hey, it's Rapping Katie Stoll here to tell you about Stamps.com. I'm not actually going to rap, though. It's really hard. But listen, we're already elbow deep in 2023. Don't you think you should level up your small business? Stamps.com will help you with that by letting you print your own postage and shipping labels right from your home office. You can print bulk labels in minutes, letting your business move faster than a DJ can drop a sick beat. Sick beats are my middle name, you know? You know. Seriously, I was legally born rapping Katie Sick Beats Stoll, and it's honestly been a real problem for me. I have no idea why my parents would do that to me, and I don't even know how to rap. Anyway, Stamps.com will give you great discounts on USPS and UPS shipping rates and works for any size business. So what are you waiting for? Set your business up for success when you get started with Stamps.com today. Sign up with promo code MORENEWS for a special offer that includes a 4-week trial plus free postage and a free digital scale. No long-term commitments or contracts. Just go to Stamps.com, click the microphone at the top of the page, and enter code MORENEWS. Get your business in control. Take it from me, rapping Katie Stoll. I didn't mean to make that one rhyme. Seriously, that's really not my thing. I don't want to, misrepresent myself at all.
And we're B'd right in our A's. And if you are one of them Benjamin Buttons who go backward in time or whatever, I didn't watch it. What we were talking about in your future, I guess, again, didn't see it, is that the airlines have been treated to a combination of recessions, 9/11, and massive deregulation. Also, that one time Denzel Washington flew the plane upside down, but I think that was just a movie and it's weird to even bring up, so sorry for bringing it up. This situation created a bit of a monster in that there are now just 4 major airlines in the US, and they all conspire together to do pretty much whatever they want to us, even butt stuff. It's kind of weird how they're both the victim of this story and the villain, because it seems that there's always something that causes these airlines to touch tips with bankruptcy. And while perhaps they know that and try to preemptively cut corners, I can't help but notice that their CEOs make all of the money. In the same year, they ate shit over the holidays. Southwest gave their CEO a giant pay raise. Seems like they might just be bad with their money. It's this combination of woe is me posturing with a seemingly unspoken knowledge that they won't actually go away. It's like watching that Obi-Wan show. They can try to make us think he's in danger as if we haven't seen the originals. Also, it's bad. Both Obi-Wan and airlines are bad. Don't watch it, don't fly, or fly if you have to, but don't watch it. Because ultimately, the government needs airlines. They need people to fly to keep the country running and protect our economy, and also our time-honored tradition of lovesick fools running to the airport to tell our secret crushes not to take that big city job after all, or to tell them, don't get on that plane, it's 9/11. And so that's why, no matter how bad it gets, these major airlines will always have a government bailout waiting for them. And so, along with not fearing any antitrust actions, they don't even really fear losing money. At least not for the people at the top. And honestly, that's kind of the government's fault more than the airlines. Allow me to explain.
This morning, big trouble in the skies. The airline industry taking a devastating hit over coronavirus fears.
Who knows? Half the people in here could be breathing it in. You don't know.
Many airports across the country, ghost towns. Planes littered with empty seats after travelers ground their trips.
Oh yeah! Remember coronavirus? So retro. Glad that's totally over with. And for the airlines, it was yet another devastating impact on their business. In early 2020, passenger travel dropped 96 gosh darn %. And so once more, the airlines got a bailout in the form of $100 billion over several administrations. Because again, this isn't political. This bailout wasn't the exclusive dealings of Mr. Kofefi McSteals documents or Brandon also steals documents. And remember, that's $100 billion in taxpayer money. And so at this point, you'd like to think that someone in the government would be asking one simple question. What are we getting in return? Thanks to having zero regulatory power, the pandemic was one of the few recent moments in which the government actually had the upper hand on airlines, right? They were taking a nosedive and desperately needed rescue. And as anyone who has played the card game Munchkin can tell you, rescue doesn't come cheap. The government could have in this moment, asked for things from the airlines. And in fact, some people asked Congress to float the idea of setting emission standards or limiting bag fees, or at the very least, they could have given the bailout in the form of a loan, like at least one think tank speculated at the time. To quote the Brookings Institution, a decade of multi-billion-dollar profits proves the airlines and shippers can pay back loans. Wild theory that they can pay the loans back with all their much money. Glad we have think tanks on the case. But we didn't do any of that. Unlike striking union members, I guess, our government absolutely caters to large corporations. We just gave them the free money under the promise that they would use that money to pay their employees. And then what happened, you ask, excitedly? Well, they still laid off all their employees, of course. Huzzah! And in fact, used some of that bailout money as severance specifically to force people into early retirement. And so now the airlines had very few employees, and Congress was asking what the just happened, like they're Charlie Brown whiffing a football. And can you guess what happened after that? You know, when we decided that COVID was over and everyone started flying again.
Delta, United, and American have struggled since Memorial Day. More than 3,000 total cancellations just since Sunday morning. Walking information picket lines at 7 airports nationwide today, off-duty Delta pilots in contract talks who say they're working excessive overtime as the airline tries to fly its schedule without enough pilots.
I'm surprised. What a surprise. Airlines suddenly didn't have enough employees to handle the influx and had to cancel a bunch of flights. Like they fired everyone after being given money specifically to not fire those people. Those staffing shortages will continue well into this year, by the way. And while the airlines claimed that the money they got only covered 77% of their labor costs, they still somehow managed to give massive bonuses and cash rewards to their executives. Thank goodness for that. And so you see how perpetually this dynamic is. The airline industry is basically like a shitty roommate who keeps needing their rent covered, but also keeps buying collectible hookahs and adopting dogs. And it all kind of goes back to that initial moment with Carter and Reagan and the deregulation and air traffic controller firings. And those brief few years where we signaled to the airlines that we were opening the door for them to put their profits over employees or customers. And again, this isn't one political party causing the problem. Unless America only has one political party whose main goal is to protect capital at all costs. But either way, in a bipartisan fashion, it's just the way we decided to do it. We've given the airlines so much power that it's nearly impossible to make any effort to regulate them at this point. Biden, despite being just so sleepy, did announce new rules designed to mitigate drip pricing. It would eliminate hidden fees and basically force airlines to disclose their full ticket price up front. He and Mr. Pete are also making it easier for people to get refunds for things like flight delays by adding strict definitions to what a delay or cancellation actually is. Something that was apparently left up to the airlines before now. Like, airlines could just decide that postponing a flight several hours wasn't a delay and not refund your ticket because of it. Because holy shit, we really let them do whatever they want. So darn and come. Where does that leave us? This is normally the point of the video where we offer solutions to the problem. Most likely, we'd point to some obvious policy that has been inexplicably branded as socialist and really socialist, or some malarkey like that. But in this case, it's a bit more nuanced and probably requires a lot of moving pieces or several possible solutions. For example, we could sure use better train travel in this country, not just for the environment, but perhaps as a way to actually give the airlines competition. People wouldn't have to fly from LA to San Francisco, or from Chicago to New York, or from Dallas to Denver when a more comfortable, affordable, and only slightly longer option exists. And in Europe and parts of Asia, we're actually seeing airlines work to compete with these nearly equal travel options. So, what's the deal there? Hey, Amtrak! Can you get on this or what?
You might notice if you try to book a ticket on one of these trains, they are expensive.
Even with high ticket prices in stations like this one, Amtrak has never made money.
Amtrak doesn't own most of the 21,000 miles of tracks it uses. Freight lines do, so passenger trains often have to pull onto sidings to wait. The result? Lengthy delays. And last year, a 4.5% decline in ridership on those longer routes.
Oh, okay, never mind. Sorry I bothered you. I can see you're dealing with some stuff. Yeah, so train travel is kind of its own separate video, summed up by saying that it's all busted up. At first glance, Amtrak seems to have the exact problem airlines used to have, minus the luxury. It's highly regulated and in fact is a state-owned company, and the ticket prices are actually more expensive than flying. Incidentally, this is why I don't necessarily think having a state-owned airline is the answer either. Other countries do have those, but they seem to have all the same problems as any other airline because they are still expected to make a profit. That isn't to say we shouldn't try that, but ultimately, we could probably achieve the same goal by simply regulating the airlines we have a bit more. Regulations, a push toward train travel, and therefore investing in rail infrastructure and so on. Also, maybe let's stop taking money from billionaires who want to make pointless neon car tunnels under our cities, you know? Ultimately, the solution isn't very extreme with 3 X's. It's not favoring one side of a political debate, which might be why we haven't really found a solution. But there absolutely is a spectrum here in terms of how we, the consumers, are expected to feel about air travel. As a wise old man once said, well, not wise, actually. I guess just an old man once said, he's kind of a sex creep too. An old sex creep once said, "What's the deal with air travel?" or something like that. I don't think he actually said that. But he has done stand-up about the inconveniences of airlines in the 1990s. But then another old, different kind of sex creep, decades later, defended air travel by pointing out that it's a modern miracle, and it used to take months to journey across the country. So, which sex creep is right? I mean, about air travel specifically, and not the other things they do. I'm not entirely sure why I'm bringing these sex creeps into the conversation, but they do, I guess, represent opposite philosophies on airlines specifically. Should we be happy with what we get in exchange for the ability to fly like a bird for relatively low prices? Or do we, the consumer, deserve the ability to fly affordably without it also being a major hassle? Similarly, do we completely deregulate the airlines, or, considering all the taxpayer money we've given them, do we take them over? My dear watchers and/or listeners, I'm sorry to tell you that the answer might just be... Piss! Could have used a fucking warning before you did that. See, the beautiful but tragic thing about this airline problem is that it affects everyone. It affects your liberal cousin and conservative uncle, because airlines just don't care who you are. They will screw you either way. It's one of the few things that brings us together in this country, and the people in the government perpetuating the problem are from both political parties. And even more so, the solution also doesn't really require you to subscribe to one side, because ultimately, deregulation is somehow both the problem and solution? To quote an article by Alfred Kahn, the economist who happens to be the former chairman of CAB, these problems drive home the lesson that the dismantling of comprehensive regulation should not be understood as synonymous with total government laissez-faire. The principal failures over the last 15 years have been failures on the part of government to vigorously and imaginatively fulfill responsibilities that we, in deregulating the industry, never intended to abdicate. His name is Khan, like the guy in Star Trek. Did you notice that? I'll wait. Notice it. Okay. And what Alfred is saying in this article is basically that while deregulation of the airlines has been an overall success, it was never supposed to be a total retreat from our government. He basically points out all the same problems we have in this video and identifies that the current situation is dire, saying the continuing reconcentration of the industry threatens to extend that exploitation to an increasing proportion of the flying public in the future. He then concludes that the government could actively attempt to make markets more competitive by assuming responsibilities that it has neglected. It could vigorously enforce the antitrust laws. It could also remove barriers to competition by expanding airport capacity enough to allow new competitors to operate on routes, by dissolving preferential arrangements between hub-dominating carriers and their hub airports, and above all, by allowing foreign airlines to compete for domestic traffic, either directly or by investing in American carriers. And yeah, sure. Con seems right. The ultimate answer, for right now at least, is that we just kind of need the government to just do their fucking job, you know? That's it. Just fucking do your fucking goddamn motherfucking job. Just because they deregulated the airlines doesn't mean they are absolved from protecting the consumer from anything those airlines decide to do. Just like how a plane captain's responsibility to their passengers doesn't end when the flight ends, but extends to when the plane lands on a remote island filled with dangerous militias, apparently. Seems like the pilot didn't have to personally deal with that situation, but what do I know? Alright, I'm not a pilot. Yet. Getting lessons. Anyway, Plane, starring Gerard Butler. Everyone's talking about it. I'm Gerard Butler in Plane. He does the voice of the plane. I'm Gerard Butler. I don't know how he talks. Get off my plane! That's Gerard Butler in The Mummy. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe to the video and to the channel. We've got a podcast called Even More News. We have a patreon.com/somemore news. We have this show, Some More News, as a podcast if you prefer to hear my impression of Gerard Butler in The Mummy instead of see it. And we got merch, you know, with the puppet character on stuff. And we have love and admiration for all of God's creatures.
Dave Rubin is out there. I'm sure we'll read about this in the Twitter Files release, 2029 or whatever it's going to be. But here's Dave Rubin talking about his relationship with Twitter. I can't wrap my head around this quite a bit, but here's Dave Rubin.
Preface this by saying that the way this all unfolded is that about 2 weeks ago, I got looped in with two engineers at Twitter, because obviously I'm one of the more public people talking about the fact that something seems like it's really wrong with Twitter. There was a couple weeks when Elon got it where the engagement really seemed like it was the old days. It exploded again. And in the last few weeks, it seems very depressed, and that seems very odd. Like, it's like, wait a minute, you got Twitter. It seems like it was fixed, and now why did it get worse again?
Pause it. Let's see if we can come up with a couple of reasons why it's gotten worse. I mean, just in terms of content, there's all these racists and homophobes and transphobes and anti-Semites and anti-vaxxers.
More bots from what I've seen.
And they're back in, and that has dominated a significant portion of the engagement. I mean, ever since Elon sort of dipped his head below the radar and decided he didn't want to be the story on Twitter anymore, it got boring because all the the decent stuff people just walked away from, and then it just became a garbage a sewer essentially. Yeah. And then the other thing is, I know now a half a dozen people who have been hacked over the past 4 weeks, 3 weeks. Never had happened to them before. I cannot leave a computer personally, and I've heard a lot of other people have the same problem, without having to sign back into Twitter. And then I go through the whole phone verification, and I got to do that 2 or 3 times before it works. And I'm convinced that what we're starting to see is the implications of getting rid of all these people who are working at Twitter. Like
thousands and thousands of layoffs. That's going to have certain implications because he's trying to cut costs on office space.
Yeah. And the big implication that all these venture capital people see, people said it'd be over by now, it wouldn't load. Well, yeah, look at the revenue. Like the ad revenue is completely cratered. He's completely messed that up. Good luck fixing that, buddy.
And Twitter Player doesn't work very well. All he did was make the feed worse. You can have one where he suggests right-wingers in your feed, or you could have a chronological feed on Twitter, which is just a hellscape. And then he changed the color of the check marks, you know, to really stick it to the journalists.
Yeah, that was a really great move.
I don't even think I've noticed that, but here is
some are silver, some are piss yellow, some are blue. You can pay for the blue one.
I haven't seen that at all. I haven't seen that at all.
Politicians are silver. It's literally like an 8-year-old conception of what, you know,
what you'd fix.
A badge would be on a social media platform.
What does mine show up as?
Yours is blue. Mine's blue. Right.
I don't get it.
I don't got one because.
Yeah, okay. Matt's cooler than all of us.
Well, hold on. Let's hear this from Dave Rubin, because I guess I can anticipate hearing from Twitter engineers now that we've mentioned this on the air. Go ahead.
People usually somewhat conservative leaning, but it's basically just not woke people are claiming something's wrong. So anyway, these two engineers started doing a deep dive into my account.
Not woke.
And as they were doing a deep dive into the account, I mean, really going into the code, they started seeing things that they had not seen before. So that's why this escalated to the point of, oh, Elon wants to see you. So all that being said, here is my thread with some of the nitty gritty.
Can I offer like an alternative framing for this? Like, I think maybe the richest man on earth decided he needed a hack to come in and do PR for him because people like Cat Turret are complaining that the service seems to be degraded.
Wait a second. Are you claiming, Matt, that you don't think that there's something nefarious going on the code, that somebody broke into Twitter and changed
Dave, we need to
code?
see you. We've never seen anything like this. It's suppression. It's shadow banning of the type we've never seen before. You are the most shadow banned man. I'm surprised you're even alive after how shadow banned you are.
I mean,
Dave, I can't believe what's going to go.
Dave, what should I
Who
say?
inserted this in the code?
There's no chance that, by the way, that Dave was not incredibly eager and trying to ask to come, because Elon's already run through his IDW Rolodex with Taibbi, Barry Weiss.
Oh, but don't do that.
Right?
It's a bad idea.
Those kinds of guys. So Dave's like, hey, why can't I get in there and you can do a deep dive into my account algorithm?
Dave gets in there and the engineers show him like the green text screen from the Matrix.
With black background.
And he's like, look at Dave. If you look close enough, you'll be able to see how shadow banned you are.
So all that being said, here is my thread with some of the nitty gritty. Spent the last 2 days at Twitter in San Francisco talking to engineers, product managers, and yes, Elon Musk. Learned a ton about what's going on. Before I share, want to note that after a couple-hour meeting, I asked Elon what I could share, and he said anything that's true. Connor, just come back to me for 1 sec before we continue on that. I just want to hit that point. Because so we met on the second night for about 2 hours, and it was me. Elon had one guy with him. I apologize. I actually don't even know that I was introduced to get his name, but then it was me, Elon, this guy, and
Pause it for 1 second.
David Sachs.
Can you imagine being is Tesla still, I think, a public company, right? I mean, people have invested. We've had Pete Collis calling, and they've invested their retirement funds in Tesla. Can you imagine being that person and knowing that your CEO has of Tesla, mind you, has so much time that, never mind the fact that he's theoretically, dedicating it to Twitter, but he has so much time there that he has time to meet with Dave Rubin on multiple, successive days, and for 2 hours at a time. Like, what possible conversation? What could you possibly learn?
Right.
As Elon Musk from Dave Rubin, what could possibly, the idea that this guy's spending 2 hours remember, Matt used to make some hay out of this, that Elon Musk is working
I work 90 hours a week,
700 hours a week, and
2 of those hours with Dave Rubin, where he's like, really, can I say anything I want from this? And Elon's like, yeah, you moron, everything we've been talking about is flattering me. Go ahead and share it. Because
that's actually the point.
Anybody who watch this entire segment and see if Dave shares anything that Elon might want secret, and of course he doesn't.
Go ahead.
To get his name, but then it was me, Elon, this guy, and David Sachs was with us. We talked about a whole bunch of stuff, including politics and everything else, and that's really where he lit up when, I'll get to that in a second, when we talked about some of my political awakening, which I think is similar to his. But think about how interesting that is, that at the end of the thing, at the end of the conversation, I said, look, I'd love to share some of this stuff. Is there anything you don't want me to say? Anything that's true. Like, and he didn't have to think about it. Like, he didn't know what I was talking about with the engineers. I was sitting with engineers with their laptops, you know, two guys with their laptops, coding, asking me all these questions, and I'm asking them all these questions. He had no idea what I had seen. So the fact that his default position was anything that's true, I think that says an awful lot about the guy. Okay, here's the thing. A fractal Rube Goldberg machine. That's what Elon Musk called Twitter. As they fix the code, more problems arise. A delicate balance he likened to a Jenga tower. One wrong move, the whole thing collapses.
Can you pause it? You don't need to take it off the screen, but I just love the brilliance of this man using a Jenga tower as an analogy. That's never been done before. Yeah. Your company's built like a Jenga tower? Is that what we're saying?
Where one piece could come out, it would collapse. It would literally fall to the ground.
Those thousands of workers might be some of those Jenga blocks.
There was a guy at Air America. I honestly can't remember his name. He was the last guy to come in the last regime, and he was the CEO hired. He was from he was a consultant, radio consultant that came in, and this is after he had they had fired Randy Rhodes, and they had really basically just like destroyed their market reach. I mean, all of it. And as I'm talking to the guy, and he's telling me, like, we're going to develop the most liberal website, and then we're going to have a centrist radio station. And I was like, congratulations, you're the first guy in like 30 years to do a fully horizontal business plan. You should open up a shoe store and refuse to advertise on either one of those platforms. And he goes, look, there were 5 decisions made before I became CEO here that were a problem. And like the one thing this guy had actually thought about was his pre-excuse as to why everything was going to fail. That was the one thing he did, and that's exactly what Elon Musk is doing there. Yeah. This thing is such a mess.
It's
that
a
if you come
fractal
in
Rube
and
Goldberg
treat it
machine.
the way that you should, it's going to fall apart. And really, the only reason why this is not falling apart is because I'm here. Even though it wasn't falling apart before.
I'm here playing 8-dimensional Jenga when I fire the entire ad staff.
Exactly.
So a fractal Rube Goldberg machine is just the marble falls to the ground? Is that what that is?
I met him were after midnight. I met with several engineers who were doing a deep dive on why my account and so many others seem to be absolutely crushed after that 2 or 3 week return to normalcy when Elon first took over. They still have more questions than answers, but they did learn a bunch of stuff. Accounts aren't just hit with
don't have to take it off the screen, but I would just say my first guess on the answer is that all those bots that those right-wing bots that were paid for got taken out. Basically, that's what happened. And all of a sudden, you realize that your audience wasn't real. And they're still trying to figure that out. Go ahead.
Labels that are obvious to insiders. They now found more secret labels which are causing shadow bans. Just so you guys know, this is what they found on my account, and that's why I was called in. My account was hit with all 3. Recent abuse strike, recent misinformation strike, recent suspension strike.
You're out.
It's unclear so far what these strikes actually do, but for sure they suppress views and recommendations. They are trying to figure out to what extent. I also had many innocuous tweets labeled NSFW, not safe for work, or NSFA, not safe for ads, which affect visibility in the timeline. Also, there's an entire keyword database so that machine learning makes sure not to promote violence, porn, etc. But it's a mess of overreaching words. Literally, the word gay was on the keyword list, which would make you not advertiser friendly and harm the tweet in the algorithm.
Pause it for a second. I mean, oh my God. He's implying that he was shadow banned because he's gay, as opposed to maybe like every time like he's talking about, the problems with the gay agenda, like the gays are out of control, and I'm like one of the good gays.
I mean, that's the thing is, like, that's one thing the left criticizes, like, whether it's gay, that happens. Yes, that's a problem.
And the reason why that happens is because you have fewer human beings who can contextualize the use of that word. And so the automated AI just sees the word and they default to... There's so many homophobes on this platform. It's safer for us from an advertising perspective to not allow that tweet to get any traction. But the idea that, he's like making it as if someone snuck in and nefariously put this stuff into his code, just his code. I mean, it's just absurd.
Yeah.
There should be a code that flags stuff for too stupid for human consumption.
Yes. Isn't the whole thing that he was being shadow banned because he was a conservative and supporting of DeSantis, and then you look under the hood and it's because you're gay?
Well, what's also great is right here he does get into an example, and we can judge that example on its merits.
Okay, there we go.
You not advertiser friendly and harm the tweet in the algorithm. Backing up for a sec, they found the recent suspension strike on my account most interesting because it was from July 2022 when I was suspended for calling out Jordan Peterson's unjust suspension.
Pause it. So just to remind folks what that was when Jordan Peterson, it wasn't an unjust suspension. Jordan Peterson we're talking about Elliot Page and called Elliot Page's doctors criminal butchers, and the staff of Twitter is like, yeah, that crosses our hate speech against
and
trans
dead
people
named
line.
Elliot Page,
And
like
dead named-
coincidentally, like 2 days before his Daily Wire show was announced with
exactly, explicitly doing that thing that was explicitly in the rules, and the only reason it's Dave is able to call it an unjust suspension now is because his daddy Elon Musk bought Twitter and said that was an unjust suspension.
When I was suspended for calling out Jordan Peterson's unjust suspension. So though suspension was reversed, the action on the account remained. Elon was bringing in people in and out constantly and seems to be aware of pretty much every issue.
Did you write this?
He thinks maybe the entire code has to be torn down and start from scratch. At the end last night, he said that the whole situation is a flaming dumpster rolling down the street. So I assure you they are aware of the problems, and Elon and the engineers are there all night trying to untie this crazy knot. Some changes they've made, like the For You tab, have confused people and hurt engagement for accounts who have gotten the NSFA label without knowing. They also don't know for sure why things got so much better once Elon made the acquisition and why it seems far worse now. Some is probably related to the excitement around Elon himself, which also coincided with the World Cup, but that doesn't explain why it feels so off right now. We'll share more in a bit, but have to catch a flight. On a personal note, Elon is funny as hell, laughs a ton, and it's just really obvious he cares about Twitter because he cares about free speech and the bigger problems
proud of the tweets that he wrote.
He doesn't need this headache. He chose it. Also, huge shout out to David Sachs, who is helping Elon clean up this mess because he believes in the fight for free speech as much as Elon does. And massive thanks to the engineers who opened up their computers, showed me literally everything I asked for, and were total pros. Oh, and one other thing for now. Elon really lit up when we talked about the shifting political landscape out and how anyone non-woke is now far right. That notion is deeply connected to how screwy things got at Twitter, and he's working to fix it despite the huge challenges ahead. And then Elon Musk responded to my very wordy Twitter thread saying
accurate thread. Yes.
Okay, so there's
the thread in which Dave Rubin complimented me on numerous occasions is very accurate.
I do laugh a lot.
Yes, I am very funny.
I am very funny. I do laugh a lot.
Twitter is a flaming dumpster fire. Maybe I should have done a little due diligence. Oh well.
The entire thing is like, oh, they're in over their head. Like they don't know why anything's happening. They don't know why it was good. They don't know why it's bad now. They don't know what to do about it. But they think, if they first of all, the For You tab, that should have been obvious to anyone who know there was a problem with the algorithms, that you don't lean into the tab completely curated by algorithms.
The funny part is like they how long has he owned this thing now? For it seems like an eternity, but it's only like a couple of months.
How long? November or something like that. It was after the election, right?
4 months.
Oh right, yeah.
Right after the election.
3 months, and their plan so far seems to be to go person by person that is on the right and assess, like, how can we fix his feed so more people see it? Like, I gotta feel like they may have some more pressing things to do. Just the idea that that's the problem with Twitter and engagement is that Dave Rubin isn't traveling enough on Twitter. Is
when he defends Jordan Peterson's like trans bigotry.
God, I wish there was a way to short Twitter. It's like this has to be some like, God, really amazing. But there you go.
Dave, I need you here this weekend. Can you make it?
I think we've figured out what's going on, Dave.
Well, we haven't, but we found some things that we don't understand on your account, and we want you to come talk about them and how hard we're working and how good our intentions are.
And how funny I am.
I watched The Bourne Identity with Saul over the
there
weekend.
you go.
He
You like it?
loved it.
Oh, hell yeah.
Nice.
Oh, he loved it. In fact, we got into a big fight because the next day he wanted during the day. He was like, "Let's watch Bourne Supremacy." No, sorry, buddy, not doing that. Gotta practice your guitar, do something different. Let's go to the phones, shall we? I don't know why I got sidetracked there. Guess that was the.
It was the sound soundboard.
It was the sound.
It is Thursday, January 26th, 2023. My name is Emma Vigeland in for Sam Cedar, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Hal Weitzman, editor-in-chief of the Chicago Booth Review and author of What's the Matter with Delaware? How the First State has favored the rich, powerful, and criminal and how it costs us all. Come on, man.
Come on.
Come on. And later in the show, Lee Harris, staff writer at the American Prospect, will be joining us to discuss her latest piece on Wall Street's attempts to infiltrate Green New Deal initiatives. Meanwhile, Israeli forces murdered 9 Palestinians in their latest raid of the West Bank, including a 60-year-old woman. That's 29 killings so far this year in less than a month, including at least 5 children. There are also reports that say that Israeli forces fired tear gas inside of a pediatric hospital ward. Adam Schiff has announced his intention to run for Feinstein's Senate seat in 2024. Katie Porter, Barbara Lee, hash this out, please. We need a unified front against that goober. U.S. GDP rose nearly 3% in the final quarter of 2022. Now wages, please. Obama-era advisors are already publicly panicking about the debt ceiling. The same ones who wanted to cut Medicare and Social Security to appease Republicans. Thanks, but no thanks for your input. Kevin McCarthy's bigoted campaign to remove Ilhan Omar from the Foreign Affairs Committee is hitting a snag, since a move on that specific committee requires a full House vote.